loads, they take a lot of weathering. So to do this justice, we're digging into some extensive reporting from the Associated Press that covers not just the triumphs, but the controversies, the friction.
And the specific strategies he used.
Exactly.
And we should probably just set the scene of his final days. I mean, he died at home, surrounded by family, which is a peaceful end for a man whose life was, well, it was defined by constant motion.
The reporting notes he was fighting a two-front war with his health for years. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's back in 2017.
But he was also dealing with something called progressive supranuclear palsy.
It's a rare and cruel disorder. It affects your balance, your movement, and eventually your ability to speak.
And for a man whose entire career was built on the power of his voice, they called it the golden tongue. That's a particularly tragic decline.
And yet, as we'll see, he didn't let it stop him. But to understand that drive, that refusal to quit, we have to go all the way back. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by his origin story.
Oh, for sure.
When you think Jesse Jackson, you think preacher. You don't necessarily think
Quarterback.
quarterback.
But that's exactly who he was. Growing up in Greenville, South Carolina, a star athlete, he had a cannon for an arm. And this actually leads to his first major confrontation with systemic racism.
Right. He gets a football scholarship to the University of Illinois. This is the Big Ten. This is the big time. He shows up ready to lead the team, and the coaching staff, they essentially tell him, we don't do that here.
It wasn't just a preference. It was an unwritten rule of the 1950s. The quarterback was the thinking position, and the prevailing racist logic was that Black players could run and catch, but they lacked the intellectual capacity to lead an offense.
So they told him he could be a wide receiver or go home.
And that moment, it really seems to be the chip on the shoulder that never went away. He didn't just accept it. He transferred to North Carolina A&T, a historically Black college.
In Greensboro. And that pivot changed everything.
It really did. If he stays at Illinois, maybe he becomes a pro football player. But at A&T, he becomes student body president, right as the 1960s student sit-in movement is just exploding. He goes from calling plays on the field to organizing protests in the street.
He had a natural talent for it. He ends up in the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, and he catches the eye of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
And King sees this young, brash, incredibly charismatic guy, and he decides to deploy him. He sends him north.
To Chicago.
Right. The movement needed a win in the urban north. So King puts Jackson in charge of the Chicago branch of the SCLC, specifically something called Operation Breadbasket.
Okay, I want to drill down on this because Operation Breadbasket sounds like a food drive.
It sounds so harmless.
But it was actually much more aggressive.
It was pure economic warfare. Jackson realized that while you march for voting rights, you have to negotiate for economic rights. So he set up a system based on selective patronage.
Boycotts, basically.
Essentially boycotts, but with an innovation.
The covenant.
This is the contract. Yes. He wouldn't just ask a grocery chain to be nicer. He would demand they sign a covenant promising to hire, say, 50 Black truck drivers and stock 20 products from Black-owned businesses if they didn't sign.
The ministers in his network would tell their congregations to stop shopping there.
And the margins for these stores are razor thin. They couldn't afford to lose 20% of their customers overnight. It was all about leverage.
And it worked.
It worked incredibly well, and it made Jackson a rising star. But that stardom, it created friction. There were already whispers among the older SCLC leadership people like Ralph Abernathy that Jackson was a bit too eager for the spotlight.
Which brings us to the most controversial and, frankly, the most cinematic moment of his early life. April 4th, 1968, the Lorraine Motel.
Jackson was there. In the parking lot, Dr. King was up on the balcony.
When the shot rang out, it was chaos. But the history books and the people who were there have very different accounts of what happened in the next few minutes.
This is where it gets murky. In the immediate aftermath, the very next morning, Jackson appeared on the Today Show. He was wearing a turtleneck, and he told the world that he was the last person King spoke to, that King died in his arms, and that the blood on his shirt was King's blood.
He wore that blood-stained shirt for days, didn't he, to a Chicago City Council memorial. He said, "I come here because on my chest is the stain of blood from Dr. King's head." It was this incredibly visceral, almost biblical symbol of a transfer of power.
Powerful theater. The problem was, other key figures, specifically Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy, were furious.
They had a different story.
A very different story. They claimed Jackson was actually down in the parking lot when the shot hit. not up on the balcony holding King.
So they saw it as him literally seizing the mantle and the blood for his own political gain while the body was barely cold?
Exactly. It was viewed as the ultimate act of opportunism. And that friction, it just festered. It essentially broke the relationship between Jackson and the SCLC.
So by 1971, the tension was just too high.
Right. Jackson broke away and formed his own organization, Operation POSH, People United to Save Humanity.
And this is where he really becomes the icon we know. He stops being King's lieutenant and becomes Jesse Jackson. He starts holding these massive Saturday morning rallies in Chicago, and he develops this liturgy, this call and response that went viral before viral was even a thing.
I am somebody.
It's still chilling to hear the audio of it.
You have to remember the psychological conditioning of the time. You had a generation of Black Americans who had been told by the state, by the media, by the economy, that they were nobody. And Jackson would have them chant.
I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody.
He was building them up, creating a psychological armor. And once he built up that base, he decided to do something that, well, that everyone thought was insane.
He decided to run for president of the United States.
In 1984, and you really have to context check this, in 1984, the idea of a Black man running for president wasn't just a long shot. It was seen as a sideshow. The Democratic establishment hated it. They thought it would embarrass the party.
But he ran. And while 84 was impressive, it was 1988 that really blew the doors off. This is where we need to talk about the Rainbow Coalition.
This was his grand theory of politics. He believed that if you took all the people who felt locked out, Black voters, Latino voters, poor white farmers, union workers, LGBTQ activists, and you stitched them together like a quilt, you can beat the establishment.
And in 1988, the math actually started to work. This wasn't a protest anymore. He won the Michigan primary.
That was the earthquake. He won a Rust Belt industrial state with a significant white working class population. He won, what, 13 primaries and caucuses in total?
He briefly led in the delegate count. For a few weeks in 1988, it looked like Jesse Jackson might actually be the nominee.
That when you start breaking down walls that big, there's going to be debris. And we can't gloss over the self-inflicted wounds that damaged his campaigns.
The 1984 Hymietown scandal was just devastating.
It was. During a conversation with a Washington Post reporter, he referred to New York City as Hymietown. It was a staggering anti-Semitic slur.
He denied it at first, right, then said it was off the record.
Which is never an excuse. He eventually did apologize at a synagogue, but the damage was done. It alienated the Jewish community, which had been such a staunch ally of the civil rights movement. It shadowed him for decades.
It did, and it highlights that duality of Jackson. He could be incredibly empathetic and inclusive and then turn around and say something that showed a deep bias or just a lack of discipline.
Speaking of lack of discipline, let's fast forward to 2008, the rise of Barack Obama.
You would think Jackson would be leading the parade, but then there was that hot mic moment.
Oh, that was painful to watch. He's whispering to a fellow guest, doesn't know his microphone is live. And he's talking about Obama, and he says he wants to, well, the phrase was, cut his nuts off.
Because he felt Obama was talking down to Black people.
Right. It revealed this intense generational friction. Jackson was the street fighter, the guy who shouted from the outside. Obama was the cool, calm operator working from the inside. Jackson felt Obama wasn't being Black enough or radical enough in his rhetoric.
And yet, and this is why you can never write Jesse Jackson off. We cut to election night, November 2008, Grant Park, Chicago.
The image is indelible. Obama walks out as president-elect, the cameras pan to the crowd, and there's Jesse Jackson with tears just streaming down his face, uncontrollable sobbing.
And in that moment, the jealousy, the friction, the hot mics, it all just seemed to evaporate. He told the AP later that he felt the fruits of their labor. He wished Dr. King could have been there just for 30 seconds to see it.
He realized that his role hadn't been to walk through the door himself. His role was to batter the door down so someone else could. He took the hits, he took the scars, so Obama could have a smoother path.
But his career wasn't just U.S. politics. And this is the chapter of his life I find fascinating because it plays out like a spy thriller. The man was running a one-man State Department.
Shadow diplomacy. He operated on a simple philosophy. If the government is stuck, a citizen can step in. And he stepped in to some of the most hostile places on earth.
We're talking Syria in 1984, bringing home a captured Navy pilot. But the one that really blows my mind is 1990, Iraq.
Right before the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein has invaded Kuwait and is holding hundreds of foreign women and children as human shields.
The State Department isn't talking to Saddam, it's a stalemate.
So Jackson just flies to Baghdad.
He flies to Baghdad. He gets a meeting with Saddam Hussein. I mean, think about the mechanics of this. You have a Baptist preacher from South Carolina sitting across from a brutal dictator.
So what's the pitch? How does he pull that off?
He appealed to Saddam's vanity, his sense of moral legacy. He didn't threaten him. He told Saddam that releasing these people would make him look like a statesman, a humanitarian. He gave Saddam a way to back down without losing face.
And it worked?
It worked. He flew out of there with over 700 women and children, 700 lives saved because he was willing to go where the diplomats wouldn't.
He did it again in Yugoslavia in '99, freeing 3 American soldiers from Slobodan Milosevic. It's incredible to think that a private citizen had that kind of global cachet.
Eventually, the establishment recognized it too. President Clinton awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2000. It was the system finally hugging the man who had spent his life fighting it.
Let's pivot to the personal side before we close, because for a man who lived so publicly, his private life was complicated.
It was. He was married to his college sweetheart, Jacqueline, for over 60 years. They had 5 children, 2 of whom became congressmen.
But in 2001, it came out that he had fathered a daughter, Ashley, with a staffer.
A massive tabloid scandal at the time.
It was. But what's interesting is how he handled it. Instead of denying, he admitted it immediately. He provided financial support. He built a relationship with his daughter. He talked about his own background. Remember, he was born out of wedlock. And said he refused to let his daughter feel the shame he felt.
It adds a layer of humanity to the icon. He wasn't perfect. He was messy. But he owned the mess.
And he kept working through it all. Even at the end. We mentioned the health battles, Parkinson's and PSP.
The irony is just brutal. This man, the golden tongue, the man whose voice could move millions, eventually lost the ability to speak clearly.
He became physically frozen. But his mind was still sharp, and his will was still there. Al Sharpton said something beautiful in his tribute. Faith must have feet.
Meaning you can't just pray, you have to go.
Exactly. Even when Jackson couldn't walk, he was wheeled into protests. He was at the trial for Ahmaud Arbery's killers in 2021. He was at the DNC in 2024, waving from a wheelchair. He believed that if you were still breathing, you still had a responsibility to show up.
And now, that presence is gone. The family statement said he belonged to the world.
And the world is certainly feeling that vacancy today.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. We started by calling him a bridge builder. But Jackson always said there was unfinished business. He said that while Black Americans are now free, they aren't yet equal.
The economic gap is still there.
Right. And Jackson's specific genius was combining the moral authority of the church, the disruptive tactics of the street activist, and the high-level negotiation of a diplomat. He did all 3 at once.
It's a very, very rare skill set.
In today's polarized landscape where everyone stays in their lane, do we have anyone who can do that, who picks up that mantle? Or was Jesse Jackson the last of a specific kind of giant?
That is the question we're all going to be wrestling with for a long time.
A life of breaking barriers, even if the debris left a few scars. That's our deep dive on the legacy of Jesse Jackson. Thanks for listening.
Keep hope alive.